Well, thank you, Honor, for the kind introduction. Well, as Honor said, I'm going to talk about reality, not inventing reality, not creating new realities, but about reality as it is now, because part of it, we might or might not realize it, is actually hidden from us. And I thought I would start with an image which kind of embodies, and maybe embodies is not the proper term, but which kind of represents what my presentation is going to be about. And well, in a situation like this, usually the presenter asks the audience, do you recognize this man? And I'm not going to insult you because I'm sure you know the answer. This is Fidel Castro, and actually it's not Fidel Castro. It's a portrait of the wax figure of Fidel Castro at the Madame Tussauds Museum. And it was made by Hiroshi Sugimoto. Well, I'll come back to this is the better version of the image. But yeah, you have the whole figure over here. So this is what this talk is going to be about. There is this reality around us, sometimes far away from us, sometimes close from us, and we don't know about it. Sometimes it's because we don't know where to look, or we have forgotten to look at it, or we don't want to see it. And in some cases, other instances don't want us to know about it and don't want us to look at it. And so the first part of my presentation is going to talk about secrecy, and in particular, secrecy in military operations. Yeah, the first project is a project by Milika Tomic. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing her name properly, but I try. So she found about a story of mass murder which took place in northern Afghanistan in December 2001. And the story was that so Taliban soldiers were captured by the Northern Alliance, led by the US, and they had to be transported to another city. So they put all these prisoners inside a series of big containers. And then they started a convoy, and the prisoners had no access to food or even to water. And at some point, they started suffering because they didn't have any air coming in. So they were suffocating, and they started shouting because they wanted to have air. So the convoy stopped, and the soldiers were asked to take their automatic shotgun and shoot at the containers. And of course, some of the prisoners died, and then the convoy started again. And when it arrived at its final destination, the few remaining people who had either not been shot or who had not died of suffocation were all killed and buried in a mass grave. And so that happened in 2001. No one talked about it. The first article appeared 2 years later. There is absolutely no photo, no image to record, only testimonies of soldiers. So Milika Tomic, well, she read about the story and she thought, well, there is no representation of it. Why shouldn't I take that into my own hands and make fake images of that mass murder? And it's going to be fake on different level because she also changed the location. Of course, she didn't have people killed. She only reproduced the act of shooting into the container. So the first time, she did it in several cities. The first time was in Belgrade. And of course, to shoot into a container, if you want to do it legally, it's not that easy. So in the end, she found a place where she could do that. So she hired 3 men, which she found in a sports club. And it's a club where members of the military and of the police go to socialize and practice shooting. They ask no question. She gave them money. They just shot at the container. And then she used it for a performance in the center of Belgrade. But the important thing for us is at some moment, she decided to investigate which kind of weapons did they use, which kind of bullets. And so she traced the history of, well, the weapons were Kalashnikov, and the bullets actually to shoot through these containers, which are very, very, they're not easy to pierce through. So they had to use special bullets. I don't remember, I never tried to remember the name of the bullets because it's a very long one. But the story is that these bullets actually were produced in Bosnia, in 1988, and then they were transported. They were used in Kosovo during the war in ex-Yugoslavia, so they killed a number of opponents, and then they were transported to Serbia when the army retreated from Kosovo. And so she did this performance in several other cities, and in every single city where she went, she discovered this narrative of how every single city is linked somewhere to violence, either in this case to local violence, or in the case, I don't have a photograph of the performance she did in Australia, but in Australia, it was an entirely different scenario. She could only have this shooting done on private ground. She had to find private shooter, which were actually, they're called raw shooter, they're kangaroo hunters. And the bullets, as it turned out, were the bullets the same bullets that were used in Iraq during the war by the Australian troops. She did as well in Armenia. In Armenia, she actually could not shoot because she was completely forbidden to use firearms, and also it would have traumatized the population because some actually live inside containers and have their own house inside containers. So that would be really awful for them to see people shooting at containers. She tried to do it in Great Britain. Actually, the only place where she was allowed to do it was inside the studio of the BBC. So, you know, when we look at a picture like this, which is a random container and with bullet holes in it, there is actually a whole history behind. And also she uncovered that with every single place where she went, she found they were every city was part of a network linked to a broader network of violence, and that every government had its own rule of who could use this violence and in which context and where exactly. But then, as the other project I'm going to discuss are going to show, this violence can not only be legally I don't know how to say it, but let's say done in a certain context and by a certain group of people, but not everybody can talk about it, and not everybody can talk about it in the way they want. That became evident, for example, in 2008 when Susan Upton had this, I don't know if you heard about it, I used to see it, at the time I saw it a bit everywhere in the news. She made portraits of soldiers, and they are not dead. They're just, they just have their head on the floor. And to her, the way she explains it is that we see these soldiers going to war, and usually they are dressed with camouflage, and they have helmet, and they are a bit anonymous. So she wanted to make them, closer from us and give them a certain fragility and individuality. But it was interpreted by certain cities and certain politicians as being very subversive, and at the time there was still, it was still forbidden in the US to take pictures of the coffin of the dead soldiers coming back from war, so the billboard had to disappear in some of the cities. This link between, the way countries are communicating and using images is absolutely not new at all. The Soviets were really, really good at it, first with agitprop, and then the way they use montage and collage and mixed photo and graphic to create a series of images where propaganda and reality appear to be the same thing. And, well, of course, fascist government was also very good at using these, at the time, emerging and fairly new media that were photography, film, and radio. The next project is by Adam Bromberg and Olivier Stanarin, who wanted to comment on the topic I said before of the military and the government having a kind of monopoly of the way war and violence is communicated. So in June 2008, they managed to be accepted as embedded photo reporter in Afghanistan. And And they were really critical about the way the work of photo reporter, the one who are embedded, because usually you have to comply with the rules of the military, and every single picture that has to be published first has to be approved, so some of them are censored. And they thought the only way we can be subversive is by taking no picture at all. So they came with camera, but which were decoy camera. They just pretended to take pictures, and any picture they took, they destroyed it. But what they went there for is to have these really big rolls of photographic paper, of some of 6 meters long. And every day for 20 seconds, they expose it to the light. So what you see, this abstract image, is actually the reaction of the paper to the light and the heat. And yeah, that was their work. Of course, when the military realized what they were doing, they sent them back to England. But to them, even if it looks like it is a piece of non-documentation of war, the idea is that going there and being an embedded journalist is really not enough to communicate the suffering of the local population or of the soldiers who might die the day after. So it's kind of, I found this work really symbolic and powerful. And to them, they don't pretend to represent the reality of war, but at least they don't pretend to do it. And maybe some of the photographies we see in magazines representing the war are also not representing everything we should know about war. Yeah, the piece was accompanied by, I thought, a really fun, well, quite absurd piece of performance, because what you see, this big box, or maybe there is a, no, this big box contains the photographic papers when they were transported from London to Afghanistan. And what they did, they just filmed the soldier as they were taking this box and transporting it from one bus to another, and to a jeep, and to a tank, and to a plane. And so that was another side of war, which is one made of really routine and repetitive gesture, and the soldiers who were, going through the same motion to ship this box. They had no idea what it contained. What they were doing had no meaning and no sense. But yeah, it described another reality of war. And of course, talking about war and the way, and at least military operation and the way they are represented, I need to talk about Trevor Paglen. So Trevor Paglen is interested in the aesthetics and the politics of secrecy. And for a number of years, he's been documenting quite precisely. He's an artist, but also he's a geographer and a writer. He's been documenting the activities, the secret activities of the US military and of intelligence agencies. I'm not going, he's written many books, done many exhibitions, and there are several bodies of work. And what I want to do is just give you, how do you say, not an introduction, but I just want you to, when you go back, go on Google video and try to find some of his talk. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I love his work, and yeah, he speaks very well about it, certainly better than me. Anyway, he wanted, one of the things he tried to document were the secret bases, which are located, for example, in the United States. And the United States having this really vast landscape, they use the landscape as a tool to really hide some of their secret bases. And of course, it's very difficult to get access to it if you're not one of them. And it's almost impossible to go near it because it's all around. There is a security zone which you cannot enter. And so with the naked eyes and with special instruments, there's no way you can see them. They're obviously not on Google Maps. So he used the same tool than the astrophotographer when they want to take a picture of a celestial body which can be trillions of miles away from Earth. And he used the same kind of instrument, but to photograph and to take evidence of the existence of this secret base. Of course, they're not as distant as some stars, for example, but they are as accessible, they are as difficult to see because these bases are veiled by secrecy. Yeah, I'm not going to go in detail. Yeah, I just wanted to mention this one because I like it a lot. It's one of his latest work. It's part of a series called The Other Night Sky, and he's documenting the secret reconnaissance satellites of the US that goes, around the Earth and which are not supposed to exist. And he worked with engineers and computer scientists who help him develop software models, a software model that enable him to calculate the trajectory and the kind of orbit the satellites are going to take. So he's better informed of where they will be and when, and take pictures of them. And yeah, what he does is a bit similar to what astronomers of the 17th century, such as Johannes Kepler or Galileo Galilei, were doing, because they started documenting realities which everybody said didn't exist. Okay, I added something else from him. Okay, I really love this one. Because all these secret missions and secret operations and bases, they are not supposed to exist. They are called, he calls it the black world. But in the military, you need to have some insignia and badges to recognize each other and to know on which mission we are working and with whom and where. So these people working for these secret missions, they have special badges, and he's been collecting something like 100 of them. And these badges are not supposed to, he made a book with them. These badges are not supposed to be made public. They're supposed to, be used inside the base or be part of private collection. So, yeah. Always in the dark. We own the night. Tastes like chicken. There's a book, which I liked a lot. I needed to mention that there's Neil White is doing something similar in England. He takes people on bus tours, which he called secrecy and technology tours, and he goes around all these laboratories and centers in the UK, developing very sophisticated technology, but these centers usually don't communicate everything that they are doing, so he takes people on bus to photograph as much as he can. He uses some archives as well. There is also a website called Dark Places where there is a map and all kinds of information about where these places are in the UK. For some reason yesterday I wanted to take some screenshot of it, but the website was down, so I don't know. It exists. It's called darkplaces.co.uk. And he works a lot. They work a lot with amateurs who are simply passionate about these secret places. He also takes into account, that's quite different from what Trevor does, he takes into account rumors and conspiracy theories, because he thinks it's part of the narrative, even if he doesn't necessarily agree with them. But I don't want to say, if we don't see part of our reality, it's part only of the government and of the military and maybe of corporation and of banks, because it's also, part of it we are to blame for part of it. And I have another depressing project, I'm sorry. I want to illustrate this by a video I saw a few years ago in Turin. There was a retrospective of Adel Abdesemed, and the exhibition almost didn't open because he went to a slaughterhouse in Mexico, and he simply asked if he could film, and he documented the way animals are killed. So if ever you see, or you want to see, don't trust me, what you're going to see is animals killed with a hammer. So there is a pig, there is a horse, there is a goat, there is a sheep, any kind of animal you eat. And people were really, really angry. They said, oh, this is disgusting, this is animal cruelty. Because in Mexico, it's actually legal to go and walk inside a slaughterhouse. In the past, I guess in Europe it was as well, but in the city of Turin where I saw this, there are slaughterhouses, of course, but you cannot take any picture of them, and you cannot communicate them. And I don't know exactly how the legislation is in the United Kingdom, but I guess it's fairly similar, because a few months ago, I saw a performance by Matthew Herbert in Manchester for Future Sonic, during the Future Sonic Festival. And what he did was he followed the pig during 1 year, from the moment a pig was born until the moment the pig arrived in a plate to be eaten. And for every month of the life of the pig, of the life and death of the pig, he made a track. And so he could, he could be present at the birth of the pig and see the pig grow up, but he could not record the moment that the pig was slaughtered. I think it's because now slaughterhouses are private. Okay, and there is, if you want to hear more about the pig, there is an album. Yeah, as I said, some of this reality that we don't see is because we don't want to see it. There's a lot of hypocrisy about the way our meat is produced. And I don't want to depress everybody, so I will end on a more cheerful note. I don't know if you've seen this project on blogs and websites. I discovered it in London in an exhibition recently. So it's an artist from Canada, and the 9 eyes of Google Street View, they refer to the 9 cameras on top of the pole that's on the vehicle of the Google Street View. And he stayed inside, in front of his computer, and he's been looking at the world through the 9 eyes of Google Street View. So, he's been looking for quirky, amusing, ridiculous, and sometimes just beautiful moments. I don't know if you can read it, but it's, it's in Edinburgh. That's my favorite. This one is in Mexico. And actually, I realized that several other artists have worked with Google Street View. One of them is Michael Wolff, who became quite famous a few years ago because he had this series called Architecture of Density, and he traveled to Asia to take pictures of this high-rise building, and which were impressive. It was very impressive to see them like mushrooming and growing up, and he made these kind of abstract photographies. Well, they look a bit abstract, and then you realize that it's actually the house. The houses or the offices of the people inside it. And he married someone who lived in Paris, so he moved to Paris. And after all the excitement of Asia, he thought that Paris was extremely boring and repetitive and unsurprising because, well, the city of Paris hasn't changed since Haussmann. So he was not inspired to take pictures of Paris. But he discovered that Paris was more exciting through the eyes of Google Street Views. So he made this series. He has a series of, he made it in other cities in the world of people who point their finger to the car. And he has a long series showing accidents happening or about to happen. And actually, it caused a controversy because I think it was last year he won an honorary mention at the World Press Photo, and it caused a lot of controversy. Some people saying, "Oh, this is not photo reporting. This is not even photography." I don't remember how I wanted to conclude, except that, yeah, that was my take on improving reality. Some of it might have been a bit depressive. I'm sorry about that, but I also think that. Yeah, there's a lot of reality around us that we don't see, that is hidden from us, and part of improving our reality would actually be to show it to us and not hide it. I think the parallel would be when we had this conversation with my boyfriend because he had all these piles of things he had to pay, and he said, "Oh, and I don't want to see that because I've been stupid with my car, and I need to pay electricity," and they were piling up, and then I said, "Well, maybe it's better. It's better to know. It cannot be worse than not knowing and imagining what's inside this letter." So, with this very mundane anecdote, I will conclude. Thank you very much.